Okay, everybody, we're ready. How's it going? Let me get the video there. All right, Ben, say hi to the live streamers.
Hi, live streamers.
Well, wave to them.
Oh, silly me.
Silly
I see you.
Oh,
what
good.
TV show was that?
I don't know.
Huh? No,
You're
wasn't
talking
it
about
TV?
Cut It Out,
Yeah.
Joey Gladstone.
Joey, yeah, I see you is from Robert De Niro. Meet the Parents.
Oh, yeah.
I see you. I see you. Okay.
I got nipples, Greg. Can you milk me? Okay. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Let's just talk about that all day.
Sure, why not? All right, the Ben Joravsky Show for your Thursday, June 6th is just moments away, and that'll probably be the only reference to Meet the Parents today.
No way.
Uh-oh. But before we get started, we would like to thank the following unions for jumping on board and bringing back the Ben Joravsky Show. First up, it is the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, and no, not Aerosmith, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A big thank you once again to those unions for jumping on board and bringing back the Ben Joravsky Show. And, of course, today's program is brought to you by the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. Maybe. Uh-oh. All right, so we're going to have some issues there with the music. We're going to have to figure that out. All right.
Oh.
Hang tight.
Hang tight, millennials.
Brian! Get the tag Brian out here. Uh-oh.
You want me to sing?
Yeah, stall, my friend.
Oh, okay.
You're great at stalling.
I'll sing. What song was I singing earlier today? I can't remember. Help Me, Rhonda?
There we go. I figured it out.
Oh, you're the man.
All right.
He went to radio school, everybody.
This is what the live streamers get, all right? They get this little... I take all of this out for
I
the
know, the
download.
podcast.
We sound like total pros on the download.
Oh, yeah, the podcast.
All right, everybody, just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Hey, unions, thanks for jumping on board and bringing this back, huh? That's awesome. Okay, let's see here. Make sure we're recording. We're good to go there.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Hold on.
Ding,
1
ding,
second.
ding, ding. Yeah.
Oh.
Ding, 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 ding.
That's awesome. Okay, everybody, I think we're ready to go now here. All right, 1 second. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It is Thursday, June 6th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, we welcome businessman Edwin Eisendrath, president of the Chicago Federation of Labor. Bob Ryder will join us, and we welcome political activist Ann Shaw. And now your host, the meanest air organ player this side of the Mississippi, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this We'll Always Have Rom Thursday. And here's why.
I knew you'd come around on that guy.
So a few weeks ago, when we were at the Lori Lightfoot inauguration, a dude in the press corps leaned over to me and said, "Hey, Ben, what are you going to write about now?"
Is that what he sounds like? Who's that?
I don't know. It just seems like people are always going, "Hey, Ben, what are you going to write about now?" They did it during the Daily Years. What was he getting at? I'll tell you what he was getting at. He was getting at the fact that Mayor Rahm was heading out the door and Lori Lightfoot was coming in. As everybody knows, my favorite political punching bag for the last 8 years, metaphorically speaking, of course, has been Mayor Rahm. And come on,
you never really punched him?
No, that was a metaphor, okay?
Man,
Don't arrest me. The police, here they come. Indiana wants me. All right, it was a metaphor, people, okay? Anyway, I had my reasons, and I think most of you would agree with me. I mean, he was mayor 1% and all. Basically, his policies consisted of taking from the poor and giving to the rich. You all know it's true. Stop denying it, Chicago. The days of denial are over. Anyway, so it's hard not to bash that. But now, D, what am I supposed to do? I'm having kind of like this existential crisis, all right? We got all these politicians who are doing what I want them to do. What am I supposed to do now, huh? All right, on the state level.
You better figure it out. We got shows to do.
Got shows. I got to bash somebody. Well, on the state level, J.B. Pritzker, your favorite, all right? Let's see. Let's just what he did in the last 2 weeks. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Legalize reefer? Check. I've been pushing for that for like 10 years. Fair taxes? Check. Okay, it's still up to the voters to approve it, but at least he got it on the ballot, so give him credit for that. Reproductive rights? Check. The infrastructure repair? Great column, by the way, by Mark Brown in today's Bright One. Where is it? What page it is, but good job by Mark Brown. On page 13, if there's anybody out there like me who reads the newspaper as opposed to reading it on their phone. But great column by Mark Brown about the infrastructure. Some would just call it like pure pork. But anyway, we got to fix our roads and bridges. So good for that. Good for him on that front. And let's see. Anything else? Higher minimum wage. Not as high as it should be, but check on that. So one more time, Terry Cosgrove, you were right. J.B. Pritzker has been a good governor so far. All right. Goodbye.
I'm J.B. Pritzker, and I'm not a perfect person.
All right. We all know that. Anyway, so on the local scene, we have Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And, she's sort of sounding like me, D. I know we're going to talk about this a little later. A little tease here. That's what they call it on the radio.
You are getting so good at this.
A tease.
What are these on our head? What we're wearing right now on our head? What are they called?
Volkswagens.
Oh, okay, you're embarrassing us. They're cans.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
Why did I think they were Volkswagens?
I don't know.
So anyway, Lori Lightfoot. What did she do? Oh, she chastised a developer. That was the developer from the One Central Plan. Remember, that was the one that was hoodwinking people in Chicago. Here's what I'm going to do. I need a platform on which to build my skyscraper. I know what. I'll tell you, you need a transit center. None of you realize you need a transit center, but I'm going to tell you need one. He's going to build a transit center, and then he's going to put his skyscraper on top of the transit center. Everybody in Chicago's like, wow, we need a transit center. Well, Lori Lightfoot says, not so fast, Buster. We'll get into that later, D. So, I like it that she's a little more vigilant in terms of dealing with developers as opposed to just letting them do whatever they want. So, still watching to see if she takes a strong stand on Lincoln Yards. The ball is in your court, Lori. But anyway, so it's kind of hard to be ripping Lori. So what am I going to do, D, huh? Well, I open up my
Leave me alone. Don't rip me.
I would never rip you. Two things to rip in today's Bright One. How about the Ricketts? They own the Cubs. They invited the top Trump donors to Chicago Cubs game on tap. This is the headline, Lynn Sweet story in the paper. Quote, the highest rollers to President Donald Trump's re-election drive, chaired by Cubs co-owner Todd Ricketts, hit Chicago Friday for a Trump Victory Committee summer retreat. Good God. Featuring White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and Interior Secretary David Bernhardt, capped with a Saturday game at Wrigley Field. Oh, isn't that sweet? Little Trumpsters who hate Chicago, always putting Chicago down, denouncing our city, et cetera, use it as a punching bag. Come here to raise money, and then they're ushered right into Wrigley Field to watch your beloved Cardinals, D, play the Cubs. Big-time game. So it's always good, it's the Ricketts, they're always there to bash, own the Cubs. I've been a Cub fan for many, many years, but this is really getting harder and harder to take. And then, of course, who else is there to bash but your favorite mayor, Dennis, Mayor Rahm, also in today's story, also in today's Bright One, an article, let me get to it, page 9. You'll love this. We talked about this briefly yesterday. Emanuel takes job with campaign donors Wall Street firm. Rahm Emanuel, fresh off a 2-term run as Chicago mayor, is joining a Wall Street investment banking firm and opening a Chicago office as a senior counselor for the company. And the co-founders of Centerview Partners, LLC, Blair Efron, said in a statement announcing Emanuel's hiring that he was, quote, pleased to welcome the former mayor and longtime political operative. Efron gave money to Rahm's campaign. So Rahm is further trying to enhance his reputation as Mayor 1%. Oh, now he's post-Mayor 1%. By the way, it's a boutique investment firm. You know what a boutique investment firm is, D?
No.
I didn't know either. It's maybe a Frank or somebody out there.
It's not boutique?
What did I say?
Boutique.
Well, what's the difference?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it's B-O-U-T. Did I mispronounce that? Anyway, I guess that's like a small investment firm. I don't understand why you would add that adjective to the front of the sentence. Anyway, good for you, Rahm. You're going to go out and make some money after you enabled so many of your friends to make so much money off the city of Chicago, the suckers that we are. So the good news, D, if ever I run out of politicians to bash, there's always Mayor Rahm. We got a great show today, everybody. Edwin Eisendrath, my old pal, who used to be alderman of the 43rd Ward, used to own the Chicago Sun-Times and the Reader, will be here in the studio at 1:30. We'll be talking some D-Day talk. And at 2 o'clock, Bob Ryder, Chicago Federation of Labor, will be here talking labor talk, labor on Thursday with Bob Ryder, Chicago Federation of Labor, and Ann Shaw, political activist. We'll be talking about many things, including House Bill 3394, interesting House bill about corporate boards and whether they should be required to have minorities on them. So we got a great show with a lot of political talk ahead of us. But before we do any of that, the doctor with the news.
How's it going, guys? Name's Dennis. Not a doctor. All right, it's the middle of Thursday. Let's talk about the national news this afternoon. First up, Donald Trump. Let's just get this out of the way. After special counsel Robert Mueller's public statement last week regarding his Russian investigation, Donald Trump said special counsel Robert Mueller, quote, made such a fool out of himself. And hey, this is sort of refreshing, Ben. He didn't make the statement on Twitter.
No, where did he make it? Facebook?
I said sort of because it was on Fox News.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know. In an interview set to air tonight with Fox News and one Laura Ingraham. Ben, do you ever watch Laura Ingraham?
No.
Oh, really?
Never.
I'm surprised. Well, on this program, President Donald Trump said, quote, and this is the actual quote. Ben, help me make sense of this if you could, please. Okay. Quote,
let me tell you, he made such a fool out of himself. Because what people don't report is the letter he had to do to straighten out his testimony because his testimony was wrong.
Wait, time out. The he in that sentence is Mueller?
Yeah.
He said Mueller made a fool out of himself?
Yeah.
So now he's trash talking Mueller.
Yeah.
This is new. I hadn't heard this one. In fact, Mueller did Trump a favor. He never could come clearly and directly and succinctly say whatever it was he was trying to say. He did it with double negatives, etc. So everybody's confused, leaving Trump the ability to say, I was completely exonerated, even though the report far from exonerates him. So you think he would be applauding Mueller. So maybe, you know what? Maybe he starts trash talking him. Now Mueller will come, all right, you want to trash talk me? Hey, Congress, I'll go testify to Congress, tell you all the real secrets that I've been hiding from you for all this time. I don't know if it's a wise strategy for Donald Trump to trash talk Bob Mueller.
Today, the president, hold on, Donald Trump, what's that?
No collusion.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, if you say so.
Today, Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute to the veterans of D-Day at a Normandy ceremony marking the 75th anniversary of the invasion. Meanwhile, Nancy, who is this guy, Ben Joravsky, and why does he keep sending me love letters, Pelosi? House Speaker Pelosi, as we've mentioned on quite a few occasions, has been facing a Democratic dilemma as of late. Her colleagues still want her to get on board for impeaching the president, and she still insists it's a bad idea. What's a House Speaker to do? Well, Ben, I'm not sure what you've been writing in these letters, but maybe this is all you. But on Tuesday night, Pelosi said that she doesn't want Donald Trump impeached because she'd rather see him in prison.
She said that? Man, everybody's like... Turn it into Sergio. We got to talk to Sergio again, our wrestling expert. We're coming on next week talking about the trash talking that goes on in politics. So now Nancy Pelosi is kind of heading down that lock her up road, if you know what I'm saying. That's where the Trumps have been. They still start chanting that when they have a big rally talking about Hillary Clinton. I would like to see impeachment proceedings begin, and I gather from this statement by Pelosi that she's still, walking that fine line. So this is her way of saying to the people like me who are loyal Democratic voters, I understand your anger. I understand your frustration. I agree that he's a horrible person, but it's also her way of saying strategically she doesn't think it's in the best interest of the Democratic Party to begin impeachment proceedings. D, we ask every single person who comes into the studio whether they think the Dems should begin impeachment proceedings, and only one person for 10 trivia points. Do you remember who the one person who said he didn't think it was a good idea?
Union man Jeff Johnson.
Very good.
Very good producer of the show.
Well, you might have been out of the room at the time. So most Democrats, is what I'm trying to say, want impeachment proceedings to begin. So Nancy Pelosi is still walking that fine line.
Pelosi reportedly argued at the meeting with Jerry Nadler and other Democrats that she would prefer to see Trump defeated in the 2020 election and then prosecuted for his crimes. Ben just handed me a note. Hold on, let me see what this says. Pelosi's so cool. Oh, we know you love Nancy Pelosi, dude. Come on. Get over it. All right. Now
what happened to the I Heart Nancy Pelosi?
I threw it in the garbage.
Okay.
All right. Now time for a hell of a lot of 2020 Democratic presidential candidate updates. Oh, yeah, this will get you over with the Democratic voters, buddy. New York Mayor Bill DeBlasio will make his first Fox News appearance as a candidate for president this evening. Yeah. He's set to appear on Fox News' special report with Brett Baer, according to an advisory from his campaign. DeBlasio has also been angling for a Fox News town hall. Let's see here. Ben, is it just me, or does it seem like Bernie Sanders has been the only one of these candidates who can go on Fox News and not look like a douchebag?
Yeah, well, because Bernie Sanders has and still is saying things that a lot of Trump supporters endorse and support, which is interesting because they never vote that way. But, my guess is that when Bernie starts talking about national health care, Medicare for all, that's popular with people who don't have health care. How about that, huh? Some of whom have voted for Donald Trump in this bizarre political universe that we have. So, Bernie at least has been talking the talk and walking the walk for how many years now, D? Going way, way back to the 70s. So I could see why they would appreciate him. And, he's kind of a oddball political character in much the same way Donald Trump is, or they're different oddball political characters. So, yeah, I could see why an unconventional politician like Bernie Sanders would go over well on Fox. But this whole thing about them going on Fox, D, I've been reading about this one. It's a calculated gamble on the part of Fox and the Dems. And originally the Democrats we're not going to go on Fox. That seemed to be a universal acclamation. Elizabeth Warren is still saying she won't go on Fox. But the other candidates are so desperate to try to, raise their profile, get attention, that, we'll go on Fox. But now I guess some don't get the town halls, some do get the town halls, some just get interviews, others, so it's like even Fox is starting to get a little picky. You're not good enough for a town hall. We're just going to let you sit down and talk to the reporter.
In other news, another Democratic presidential candidate news here. Yesterday, we mentioned a handful of our Democratic candidates' presidential plans, if elected. Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Beto O'Rourke, Jay Inslee. So many candidates, so many plans. Well, today, presidential candidate and Montana Governor Steve Bullock said, hey, now, don't forget about me. I got a plan. Hold on now. Hear me out.
I completely forgot about him.
He just released a plan to keep foreign money out of U.S. elections. The proposal would add a checkbox to IRS and Federal Election Commission forms filled out by super PACs, requiring them to certify under penalty of perjury that they are not using foreign money on electioneering activity.
I don't know technically why foreign money would be any worse than any other money, but I guess it's a nice talking point. Do you see any objection to somebody giving money from, let's say, England or France, as opposed to some gazillionaire who is it's dark money? You don't know who the person is. I mean, what difference does it make? I don't know. I guess it's a talking point. Hey, it'll probably go over real well at that Fox town hall meeting.
Yeah. And speaking of Steve Bullock, it's an up and down day for this fella. A new detail on how the Democratic National Committee decides who gets into the primary debates may affect Mr. Bullock.
Yep.
They decide by poll numbers, and the new detail is that they are executing the results, or they're excluding the results of polls that ask respondents to name their favorite candidate in an open-ended question, such as, hey, who you got for president? As opposed to polls that list the candidates' names, such as, out of the following candidates, who you got for president? And believe it or not, that one little detail could kick Bullock off of the primary debates. Bullock appeared to have hit the threshold of earning a whopping 1% in
That's all you need?
And 3 eligible polls, but one of them was an ABC News Washington Post poll, which was open-ended. The DNC told Political Thursday that the poll won't count.
Yeah. Well, listen, you know what? Let them all debate. We went through this with the Republicans in 2015. And that turned out pretty well for the Republican Party, not so well for the country. But remember those debates in the summer of 2015, D? There would be, like 15 people on stage and Donald Trump trash-talking everybody. And it was very popular television. So I don't know. I think you're creating more problems than you're solving when you come up with all these rules to, limit the people who have, if so many people want to run for president, let them run. You know what they're probably going to do? Like 3 different debates. You watch the A debate, the B debate. Remember that sometimes they did that in their endorsement sessions for mayor. There were so many mayoral candidates. They divided them into different groups. So this is the A group, this is the B group, the C group, that kind of thing. And then I'll put all the front runners in the one group. I can see it coming already, D.
And finally, more news about polls in a new Economist/YouGov poll, whatever that is, when asked what candidate they'll consider voting for, meaning they can pick more than one, 53% of Democratic voters said that they will consider Joe Biden, followed by Elizabeth Warren with 40%.
53% for Joe Biden, 40% for Elizabeth Warren, did you say?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask Edwin Eisendrath, our guest at the 1:30 slot, what he thinks of that. That is interesting that Elizabeth Warren has pulled ahead of Bernie Sanders in that poll. So not sure what to make of that.
Now, of course, we'll keep you posted on these stories as today's program rolls along because we're moving on, people. We're now going to focus on what's going on locally. It's time for What Else is News. And while this is probably not news at all in any other state because, no other state went almost 3 years without one. Yeah, thanks for nothing, Bruce Rauner.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
But hey, Illinois, once again, has a budget.
Yeah, I saw that in the paper.
Yeah.
Got a budget. All right.
More on that in a moment. But first, it's one of our host, Ben Joravsky's favorite things to rant and rave about, city development deals.
Yeah, city development deals. Lori Lightfoot, yeah.
Yes.
Been drinking that Ben Joravsky Kool-Aid here. All right.
It looks like Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is pushing back, or as my dad downstate says, putting the hammer down on the Wisconsin developer of One Central, the massive project proposed for just west of Soldier Field. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Woman Spielman. Mayor Lori Lightfoot said Wednesday she essentially read the riot act this week to the Wisconsin developer of One Central. We have a few Lightfoot quotes to read here, but Ben Joravsky, your thoughts, please.
Well, are you going to get to the quotes right after this? Because I have a deep dive on these quotes. This is a different tactic, to put it mildly, from the previous administration. Lori Lightfoot is coming out strong, aggressively, I wouldn't say against the developer so much, but being vigilant about the development deal, whereas Rahm, his general style was to usher in a deal as though it already had been approved, and there would be a press conference. And in this general area, I'm thinking of the Paul basketball arena, that now it's called the Wintrust Arena, that's he just ushered that in like it was a done deal. So Lori Lightfoot clearly reading, getting a message from the voters on Election Day, has a whole different approach to big-time development deals.
All right, now to the Lori Lightfoot quotes here. Quote, I don't like the way that they are conducting themselves, and I made that clear in no uncertain terms, Lightfoot said at the City Hall meeting Tuesday, where she made an appearance for about 3 minutes. Quote, I told them they were being disrespectful to a number of the elected officials whose jurisdiction overlapped with the footprint of this project. I told them that they had to engage in a robust community engagement process, and I also told them I wasn't certain that it would be a city priority to have a transportation hub in that location. We have huge transportation needs all over the city.
Yes. All right. I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. It was a very ingenious way that this developer brought this project out. The emphasis was on, okay, one more time. To build his skyscrapers, he has to have a foundation. He has to build it on something. He can't just put it on the train tracks across the Lakeshore Drive from Soldier Field. So he needs to build a platform, all right? He wants somebody else to pay for that platform. The way to get somebody else to pay for that platform is to convince them that there's a larger public good that will benefit all of humanity. And the way to do that is say, instead of saying, I need a platform to put my skyscraper on and I want you to pay for it, what the developer very cleverly said, I give the developer credit, hey, I think we should have a transit center on the railroad tracks across the street from across Lakeshore Drive from Soldier Field. And I think it'd be a really great idea, and because it's going to help the public should pay for it. Okay, very good idea. But Lori Lightfoot is saying, well, I don't know if a transit center across Lakeshore Drive from Soldier Field is in the top 3, top 5, top 10 list of priorities, transportation priorities for the city of Chicago. So I'd like to study that before I green light it. Interesting response, Edwin Eisendrath, sitting here thinking about this. I know he's going to have some thoughts about this. He's pondering. He used to be an alderman, have to deal with this stuff all the time. Developers are always coming on his door. Knock, knock. Edwin, this is a great idea. This is why it's good for you, and you should sign on to it. So you're used to hearing every kind of sales pitch that a developer has to try to finagle a city to turn over the money. So I appreciate that Lori Lightfoot has a different attitude. Are you going to read another one of her quotes on this one? Well, here's one last quote I would like to say. Lori Lightfoot said, "There's a need for robust public process that is inclusive of stakeholders and residents in the nearby neighborhoods and across the city. And this project could be very unpopular with people who live in the South Loop for one very simple reason. Well, two, right? There's congestion, traffic issues, of course, but it would block views." And Edwin Eisendrath knows a lot about this because he dealt with a lot of zoning issues when he was the alderman of the 43rd Ward. You put in a big skyscraper, you're probably going to block somebody's view. And somebody who already lives there, somebody who's already registered to vote there, so somebody will show up at a meeting and yell and scream about his or her view being blocked. So she is sending a message to folks who live in the South Loop that I'm concerned about your individual needs, requirements, etc. My advice to any mayor who they're free to ignore me, which most do, is to remember that it's not just the locals who are affected by these big-time development deals, these mega deals. It's a citywide issue because you're spending public dollars. So it's not just a matter of appeasing the locals, which I don't know if you'll ever appease anybody if you're blocking their view of the lakefront. It's also a matter of guaranteeing all the taxpayers in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois that public expenditure is in their best interest.
All right, so there you go. And like I said, Ben Joravsky loves talking about this, so this is definitely not the last time you'll be hearing this on this program. And Ben, I don't think you'll be too happy with me on this one here. Little hard up, need a little extra cash, so I went and cut a little deal myself here, gave some podcast airtime to a certain deal going on at the moment, so if you'll excuse me.
Okay.
This portion of the Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by One Central, the massive project proposed for just west of Soldier Field. Hey, don't listen to Mayor Lightfoot. We're not bullying anyone around. We're awesome. One Central, coming soon.
Did you cut that deal?
Gotta make money, gotta pay the rent, dude.
All right, very good.
All right, moving on. Yes, it's true. Illinois has a budget. The following comes from the Sun-Times and one Tina Sfondeles. Governor J.B. Pritzker on Wednesday signed into law his first budget of $40.1 billion, that's billion with a B, dollar spending plan, alongside a measure that sets the income tax structure. Should his preferred graduated income tax plan clear a 2020 ballot referendum. Calling it a new era of fiscal stability. Arriving in Illinois, Pritzker signed the budget at a signing ceremony surrounded by legislators and members of his administration. We have audio from Pritzker's budget signing. He spoke to the press afterwards. Here's the governor.
I was pleased to have bipartisan support for this budget, bipartisan support for the infrastructure projects that we're going to be doing all over the state, and for the bills and the revenue that goes with it. And I was pleased to work with Leader Durkin on some of the tax credits that he wanted for some businesses in the state. And that, of course, takes away from dollars that you can put into other programs for people across the state. But I thought they were worthy for job creation. And, that's a form of spending also when you give tax credits. So, look, we're going to work together going forward. I realize that this is we're once again going to be in a political season where people are, telling untruths about the fair tax. But the fact is that we're going to nevertheless work across the aisle to get things done in this state together. And I was pleased that we had a bipartisan, truly bipartisan, with bicameral support, balanced budget, a real balanced budget that included the votes of many Republicans.
All right, that is a classic Illinois governor speaking. I grew up hearing Illinois governors talking about bipartisan agreements. Edwin Eisendrath is roughly my age. He's a little younger than me. He's a youngster. But he grew up listening to the same thing, this notion that Republicans and Democrats in the state of Illinois can work together for a larger interest. We lost sight of that whether the rhetoric was true or not. No one, Bruce Rauner didn't even pretend that he had to operate by those rules for his 4 years. So it's interesting to see. It's good to see, I like to say, that Pritzker is bringing it back. Now, whether the money is actually there to pay all the bills, whether the budget is really balanced, we'll have to see. Edwin knows as well as I do that a lot of games can be played with budgets before at the start of a fiscal year, and then suddenly in the middle of the fiscal year they discover, hey, the money's not there. But I like the rhetoric. I also like the fact that he points out that a tax credit is a form of its own expenditure, because that means they're not paying the taxes. So somebody else is going to have to pay the taxes to compensate. So a little honesty there in the way he presents the whole issue of tax credits.
Here's more from Governor Pritzker on the new budget.
I feel very confident that the public understands the importance of instituting a fair tax in the state of Illinois. That the fact that people who are wealthier can afford to pay it, people like me should step up to the plate, and that we ought to give some tax relief, or at least maintain for middle class and working class people across this state. I said this for 2 years on the campaign trail, how important it is that we alleviate the burden on people across the state, middle class people who have been put upon. Their wages, roughly speaking, have been stagnant. The cost of health care for them has gone up. The cost of sending their kids to college has gone up. We need to change the trajectory for the middle class and those striving to get there, and we're doing it. We began to do it this year. There's much more work ahead.
Can you say how much money?
He's way different than the last guy.
He's way different. Plus the report. But one thing that isn't different: reporters yelling, "Hey, what about?"
I kept that in there because I knew you liked it.
I love it when the reporters yell at the guy. Every movie I ever see, the press corps, it's like this rabble yelling at the politician. Anyway, lots of stuff in Pritzker's comments to talk about with Edwin Eisendrath. He's sitting here, so we'll move on and bring him on, and plus talk some D-Day. It is the 75th anniversary of D-Day.
So there you are, just like that. You're now in the know of what's going on in Illinois, and now you will have an answer the next time someone asks you, hey, what else is news?
All right, let me tell you something that Melody Angel, the great blues guitarist who's on the cover of the Chicago Reader, there she is, something that Jussie Smollett, who's in the cover of the Chicago Sun-Times,
okay.
And something that Edwin Eisendrath, who's sitting here in the studio with me, all agree. You did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. We'll bring Edwin on when we return.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture.
But we got to get down to business.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by the Northwestern Summer Writers Conference. Now in its 15th year, the 3-day conference held in Chicago features a diverse array of workshops, speakers, discussions, and readings. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/writers.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show.
Yes, indeed. As I said, Edwin Eisendrath is in the studio. I've known Edwin since the mid-1980s. I think I met you... Well, I knew your brother, John Eisendrath, first. We actually were co-authors of several stories, John Eisendrath, is an outstanding writer, was a journalist in Chicago, went on to Hollywood, made his fortune and fame making TV shows. He left me behind. Oh, John, thanks a lot for nothing. But back in the early 80s, John and
You
I...
were a character in one of the shows.
Wait a minute, nobody told me that. Did he use my name?
I don't know.
Oh, damn Eisendrath, I see you. So back in the old days when I had a different radio show, I always wanted to get Edwin on and John, but I could never work that out. So anyway, we'll make that happen someday, have Edwin and John sitting in the studio. So Edwin, welcome back, Cotter. People probably know that you're the man who I always give you credit. You saved the Sun-Times and my beloved reader when you put together a consortium of investors, including unions. Many of those unions are supporting my show. And as you may have pointed out to me, and you've moved on, but this is your first time back to the Sun-Times?
It is. I'm thrilled to be here. It's fun to see old friends. Wow, that's loud. Hang on. Can we turn these headphones down? Thank you.
You can take the headphones off, actually. You don't have to. Yeah, the headphones are good to hear, like when we play music or interviews. Like I asked you to put them on because I wanted you to hear Pritzker talking.
Right, but it sounded like I was shouting at myself.
No, you're all right.
Okay,
you're not losing your mind.
Good. It was great to come in, see old friends, be back here. It's it's one of the things I'm most proud of having done in my life, and I've gotten a few things done in my life. But when you think of the New Orleans Picayune and what happened to it 10 days ago when they laid everybody off, and no friend of the Sun-Times former owner Conrad Black getting pardoned by Donald Trump last week, the Sun-Times would have more than 200 people would have been laid off. There would have been no reader, so putting together a group that saved it. And I got to say, it's the only ownership group in years that's left the paper better than we found it. And the companies and the reader now independently owned again for the first time in ages. I'm really proud of that. And Ben, we weren't going to start here, but I think it's fair after 2 years, and it's been 2 years, to tell everybody that when I started to think about doing this deal, the first person I called was you. You want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah, and this story has never been told. We're breaking news on the Ben Joravsky Show. This is the power of the press. I hadn't seen you in years. You had gone off and made your fortune in Saudi Arabia or something like that. I'd lost touch with you. Of course, Edwin was alderman of the 43rd Ward back in the 80s. And replaced, for 10 trivia points, Edwin, who did you replace as alderman?
Marty Overman.
Very good. He hasn't lost it yet, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, out of nowhere, I got an email from Edwin. This shows the power of the press. The reader, it was election night 2016. Donald Trump was victorious. I wrote a story just sort of like capturing, I think, a lot of people's misery and anguish and fear at that very moment. And within a day or two, I got an email from you, from Edwin Eisendrath, saying something has to be done about this. And the first step that should be done, in your humble opinion, is to have a voice that represents working people or middle-class people in the city of Chicago, so that could stand up to the policies of Trump. And we met for coffee,
right?
And then you said, "So can you get me? This is so Chicago. Can you arrange for me to meet with the guild, the union?" And I called in a certain person I knew,
Yep.
and then the next thing you know, months later,
Off to the races.
Off to the races. So if
I'm
I were
grateful to you for that, and it worked out well.
yeah. And so anyway, my small role in that. All right, so you've moved on. What are you doing these days, Edwin?
Oh, that's another show.
Okay, that's another show. All right, we'll go on to. You just came back. Let's talk about your trip. This is what I really wanted to talk about with you. You just returned from France. You took your family for a trip to Normandy. Talk about this.
Yeah, I spent Memorial Day on the beaches and at the American Cemetery in Normandy. And I took my children, who are adults, because the world we all live in was shaped that week in Normandy. And, you know, for young people, World War II might as well be the Peloponnesian War. It's just ancient history, right? Even though it shaped the world we live in. And we make a terrible mistake reading history backwards. You know, what they knew and didn't know that day when they arrived, all of the horrors of the Nazi regime weren't known yet. They didn't know what was happening to Jews or gays or in Heydrich's Czechoslovakia. None of that was known yet. They just knew that they had to do something to save our freedom. And they went on this foggy morning to this beach, and you walk along the beach, and it's hard to imagine because it's a beautiful beach. And Normandy's beautiful. It's hard to imagine the fierceness of the battle. And as you walk up to the cemetery, it took them almost a week just to get that far. The battle...
It took them, the soldiers, almost a week to get to where? Just help people out a little bit with the geography.
To get a few miles. Because every hedgerow, you know, it's their farm fields, and the rows in between them are trees, and in those trees were people with guns. It was brutal, and, you know, one of the toughest battles is certainly on the European front. Asia was a different matter. But we don't think about this. You know, 18,500 people died on average a day for 6 years in Europe. The global population shrank 3% during World War II. Population usually goes up. It went down 3% in that slaughter. And we owe an enormous amount to the people, and that generation is dying now, the people who gave everything for us that week and throughout that war. I don't know how anyone can stand in that cemetery, walk on those battlefields, and not be deeply moved. There's also a lesson in who writes history here, because Americans, we forget history. I went to the French War Museum in Paris first to sort of warm up for this. And in Les Invalides, where it is, the exhibit is all about how the French resistance won the war with a little help from America. So they don't quite have that right, you know. The folks in Normandy do remember, and they are very grateful still.
And how do they show their gratitude?
In signs in windows, in friendliness, in just outright people who are my age thanking everybody they can see. It was a terrible occupation, after all, and the role that we played with our allies meant all the difference. There are enormous lessons for us, right? One. You know, we make a mistake when we think that democracy is more chaotic now than it used to be, that somehow the internet has made democracy harder. It's not true. When you think back, Chicago had more KKK members in the 1920s than any city in the United States. In the 1930s, isolationism was on the rise, nativism was rampant. FDR was a genius in bringing people together. And it wasn't just his job. It was everybody's job to bring people together. Woody Guthrie was running around the country singing, "This land is your land, this land is my land, we're in it together," right? And that was an important message. And right now, our politicians, some of our businesses, some of our journalists play on the edges, and the fabric is frayed a little bit. So when I listened this morning to some of the speeches at Normandy, on the anniversary, it's the 75th anniversary, and I read the articles in a bunch of papers. They sound a little more like poetry than prose, as people deal with the emotion of it. But one of the things, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, one of the things I hear in the language they're using is a little bit of sort of sad nostalgia that we might not be up to a challenge like that if we face it again. And, you know, many young people think climate change is that kind of a challenge, and we are not proving to be up to it.
Well, to get the United States into World War II, it took the attack at Pearl Harbor, literally took the attack at Pearl Harbor to get the United States into that war. And so if you're trying to draw an analogy between the danger that climate change presents to civilization, it's a little harder. It's not as concrete, obviously. Do you follow what I'm saying, Edwin?
I do, and I'm really not. I'm really less talking about climate change versus World War II than I'm talking about our ability to come together to face challenges.
Well, we just heard J.B. Pritzker talking about that on the local level. And let me ask you this. When you made that email to me and we got together for that coffee, it seemed as though it just seemed impossible to view bridging the differences between Trump America and non-Trump America. That was the vantage point from 2016 around Thanksgiving, right in the wake of Trump's election. Are you of a sense now that the notion that we can sort of bridge these differences, that we can be a common country again? I
always thought we could if we stepped up and fought for a shared body of facts. That's why we had that first meeting. That's why it was so important to save this independent journalism so that we could have a common shared body of facts. People can disagree about what to do with the facts, but we have to agree about what they are. And the folks in the White House make up things and call them facts all the time. But I'm less terrified 2 years on because the democracy is held. We have not, any other country faced with giving the reins of power to people who make stuff up all the time and try and tear down the institutions that we rely on to support our democracy, the democracy disappears. Ours hasn't. It's held, it's vibrant. Nancy Pelosi and others led a remarkable election a couple years ago and took back the People's House. Article 1 of the Constitution, remember, is about the legislature, not the executive branch. And I don't think the founders, they imagined a tyrant getting elected president. They never imagined a legislature lying down and letting him get away with it. Not ever. But the democracy's holding. And look what's happening here locally. I mean, the Cook County Democratic Party, has been a force your whole life, my whole life, and oops, Lori Lightfoot stepped all over him.
All right. Now, listen, not to leave the beaches in Normandy, but you gave me a transition. I have to ask you this. You talk about what's happening locally. Way back when you were the alderman of the 43rd Ward, 1987, I believe you were elected. Hard to believe, but there was a gentleman named Ed Burke in the Chicago City Council who was a power even then, not as much as he is now because Harold Washington was the mayor, and Harold Washington would not endorse him to be the finance chair. So
you mean exactly like now?
Exactly right now. Yeah, excuse me. You're right. Not like under Rahm. My mistake corrected by young Edwin. All right. So, what were your thoughts when you saw? Well, first of all, how in the world? Explain to me this, Edwin. How could Ed Burke remain so powerful for so long with everybody knowing what he was up to? I mean, it was just sort of like an open secret that Ed Burke was wheeling and dealing. He had a property tax business. He was, he was in on every single deal, and yet he stayed in power for all these years.
Chicago has a illness, and hopefully we're getting a cure. I don't know what to say about that. It's not unique to Ed Burke. There are lots of, the power structure in the city was what it was, and it's changing, and I think that's good for everybody.
What do you mean by Chicago has an illness? Explain that. And hopefully we're getting it cured.
So let me tell you a story of my very first city council meeting. At the time, I had been a public school teacher, and education, the CPS is a lot better than it was when I was teaching. And I know people have problems with CPS, but there were 4 strikes in 5 years, and the quality of what was going on in the classrooms was appalling. The school board was entirely unprofessional and didn't think about children first. So my very first city council meeting was the levy for the school board, which the city council had to approve. And I wrote an amendment that said, of course we'll vote for the levy, we won't put them out of business, but the entire board has to resign. And here are the qualifications of the people who should be on a school board. Some parents, some people who know something about teaching and profession, and who could really help turn this around. And it almost passed. The results of that were two. One, it set off I was part of setting off a couple decades of school reform. But two, the powers that be went to Springfield and changed the law, and no one in the city council has ever voted on a school tax levy since that day. So all these years you're complaining about TIFs. One of the reasons why you can do TIFs the way you do them is that the school board doesn't have to have its levy approved, so there are no issues there about the money going away and it can be made up in the dark, right? That's what the powers that be did in Illinois. That is the illness that I'm talking about. So somebody says bring in the light, I'm all for it.
Well, the sort of the governing philosophy, the history you just covered there's two distinct, let me back up. The history you're covering there's two distinct views of how the public schools should operate. The first one, when the first law was changed, it was to decentralize the school system and give control to the to parents and
LSCs.
teachers.
That was
LSCs.
after the levy vote.
Yeah, it was after the levy vote, right?
Yep.
That was the change in Springfield that you were alluding to after your levy vote. The second big time change is the one that essentially centralized the school system by bringing it back under the jurisdiction. I don't know if back is the right word, but bringing it under the jurisdiction of the mayor. He appoints without anybody with any oversight the school board members, and effectively takes control of the school budget and the municipal budget, which enables him to operate a TIF program where you take money from the schools for developing only in Chicago. So it's amazing, Edwin, that it's somehow or other the same city that thought it was a good idea to decentralize and have a balance, if you will, or a check and a balance, thought of then within 6 years it would be a good idea to centralize and put all this power into the hands. It's these radical swings. It's almost schizophrenic.
Yeah, I do think there were a lot of issues with the sort of the quality of schools and the way we thought about it. I think there was a lot of experimentation both ways. I mean, it is really true that the schools are a lot better than they were 30 years ago. And for that, however we got there, I'm grateful.
All right, we'll leave it at that one. Keep the philosophical conversations for another time. All right, let me. You got to hear J.B. Pritzker talk about a fair tax. You got to hear J.B. Pritzker talking about bipartisanship in the State House, a new day and age. Are you grateful for that? Or what's your thoughts about J.B. Pritzker, how he's starting off as our governor?
I am very happy we have a budget. I'm very happy we have the end to the intolerable gridlock in the state. I think everybody down there, the governor and the leaders and everyone down there deserves credit for what happened in this session. Maybe not all the credit they're taking, because there was an enormous pent-up demand to get stuff done. Wait till you see what the Congress of the United States will get done when we finally break the gridlock that's there right now. Because you know what? We have governing business that has to happen in the country. We had it in the state, and we made huge progress. There's still a long way to go. You do not fix this mess in one session, but they're working together. And when people work together, this is going to go all the way back to the sort of sadness I hear when people talk about D-Day. They're worried we can't work together anymore. When we work together, we can make enormous progress.
And so you keep talking about a change happening in Washington, a change happening with Congress. It's almost like it's going to be similar to the one here in Illinois. Are you confident that Trump will be defeated in the 2020?
Yes.
Why do you have that confidence? Yesterday, we just read a story. It was a poll showed 54% of Americans believe that Donald Trump will get reelected. why you're confident that he will.
Thomas Jefferson said democracies make big mistakes, but we fix them faster than any other form of government. We made a mistake. And every day people get up and they listen to whatever that noise is, and they know they made a mistake. Now, some people don't like the policies of the Democrats, and they're looking for alternatives to that. I got that. But no one thinks today, D-Day, sitting there, having an interview at the cemetery on D-Day, he's taking time out to talk about what a bad guy Bob Muller is, who is a war hero, right? No one has any patience for that kind of behavior.
Well, you don't think that plays well with his core, his followers?
I don't think so ill of his base that I believe they are blind to his faults. They don't like policies of the left, but they aren't blind to his faults. He will not win again. Now, on the other side, we have to put up a strong candidate. We have to be united on the Democratic side. We have to have a message that resonates. But remember, you and I are sitting in the middle of the country, right? The coasts were part of the problem in the last election. The power structures on the East and on the West didn't really care about any of us in the middle. And, in a democracy, when people say you're not worth anything, you know what? They get their revenge. All of us in the middle of the country have to stand up and show that we are serious and important. And, I don't really care about New York or L.A. In the middle of the country, we have to make a difference.
You said something that I'm going to take issue with, that Trump supporters basically don't like the policies of the left. And I'm going to disagree with you on that point. I believe that the policies of the left here, I'm going to defend the policies of the left, particularly in the case of health care, would be very popular with Trump voters and with some Trump voters.
Social policies. I'm sorry. On the economic policies, that's absolutely right. I'm thinking of when I say that, I was talking about social policies.
All right. So is the Democratic Party ready to take that bold leap and finally champion, without any apologies, a national health care plan, as opposed to sort of frittering around the
Ben,
edges?
I don't know. That's a lot about what this primary is about, right? That's what some of the conversation is. And it is around health care on the Democratic side. It's certainly not on taking out the Second Amendment. That one's not on the table, but health care is.
Okay. Nobody ever advocated taking away the Second Amendment.
No, somebody should. If the Supreme Court's going to rule that it means that everybody's armed to the teeth, somebody should make that argument.
Okay, they just went Michigan. They're going to use that soundbite against.
Oh, I'm not running for anything.
Okay. And
as I said, that is not on the table in this election.
All right. Talk about your own personal evolution on this issue. Were you advocating national health care in 2016, or were you part of sort of like the Hillary group that said, don't move too fast?
So I am not a healthcare expert and wasn't advocating anything, but I had pneumonia and I was working overseas, and I found myself in a hospital. I don't actually remember how I got there. And they took care of me. And in the morning, it actually was in Edinburgh, and they spent a lot of time with me. And I said, why are you spending all this time with me? He said, well, you're the only one in the hospital who isn't here for alcohol-related trauma. You're actually the only one we can talk to tonight. And in the morning, they let me go, and I said, I have to pay. And they said, no, you don't. So what do you mean I don't have to pay? I said, I'm not a taxpayer here. I have insurance. I should pay for this. They said, well, you don't know what it costs. You spend a fortune on people who are accountants and coders and input and folks to try and watch every penny, and you still make mistakes. It's going to cost me less. I don't know if it's true or not. They said it's going to cost me less not to figure it out. Go home, there's the bus. And, they took very good care of me, and there was something to be said for that.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot to be said for that, indeed. Do you have any favorites in the primary so far?
Yeah, I have one of those buttons that says Democrat for president, and I hope we stay. I hope we stay united and make that happen.
You're true blue, no matter who they nominate.
I think that the country needs this change. And by the way, for me, the fight for the Senate may be even more important in some ways. I mean, Donald Trump should not be sitting in that office. He doesn't have the character for the job. Let aside the policies. Doesn't have the character for it. But winning the Senate, taking out Mitch McConnell, would be enormously important. I've been helping a fabulous guy named Jamie Harrison, who's running in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham. He's a very strong candidate, and Lindsey Graham is vulnerable now. Actually, I think both Lindsey Grahams are vulnerable because they keep shooting at each other. So,
schizophrenic Lindsey.
I'm having some fun with that.
So you're confident? Think about what you just talked about, a Democrat winning in South Carolina.
He's running a very strong campaign. I think he has a good chance. I wouldn't say he's a favorite. He has a good chance. And can I go back to the D-Day conversation? General Eisenhower wrote 2 letters. He didn't know. He wrote a letter that said, "This is my fault. I planned this battle. I resign. I'm sorry this horrible thing happened." And he wrote another one to explain how we won. He didn't know. When we started to put together the group to get the Sun-Times, we didn't know if we could do it, right? You go into a fight that's worth fighting, you have a chance. Every day you make the odds better. And that's how I feel about politics. I feel about anything worth doing. So can we win South Carolina? You bet.
All right. Edwin Eisendrath feeling confident going into the 2020 election. And I hope the Democrats listen to us and don't duck and don't run away from that issue of health care. I think it is a winning issue, young man. I think if you put that at the top. One thing. I think the top is voting. You have to be allowed to vote. The voting has to be secure. We have a foreign power trying to make sure it's fudged. Voting is the top of my agenda. It's got to be honest. We have to believe in it. When we beat them, they're going to claim it was rigged. Oh, absolutely.
Voting is the top of the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll claim it was rigged. And by the way, speaking of which, impeachment. What's your thoughts on impeachment before I bring on?
I love Nancy.
Wait a minute,
she's my leader on this. Her strategy is going to be the right one.
Which is?
She's going to get all of the data out there and make sure Americans hear it all, and then she can decide. But if they'd voted to impeach today, we wouldn't get it done before the election anyway. Yeah. So just, it's really important. Let's let everybody know what happened.
All right. That's a valid point, but you understand, they're never going to vote to impeach them. They're never going to vote them out of office is what I'm going to say. The Senate will never convict them of the crimes. But what you're saying is take your time to make your strongest argument.
You bet.
So folks know it's...
just let everybody know the facts.
All right.
They speak for themselves.
That's Edwin Eisendrath. We got Bob Ryder sitting right over here. We're going to bring him on when we return. All right. Hey! Playing now at Steppenwolf Theater, the world premiere of Ms. Black for President. It's inspired by the true, that's true as in it really happened, TRUE story of Joan Jett Black, America's first drag queen presidential candidate. You know who created it, D?
No.
It was created by Tony nominee Tina Landau.
Oh.
And you know who else created it?
No.
Oscar winner Terrell Alvin McCraney. You know him, Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
For tickets, visit steppenwolf.org. That's Steppenwolf, like the rock group from the 60s.
Hang tight, millennials. Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Hey, everybody. What you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. Jeff, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Ben Joravsky loves that Jeff Manuel. All right, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, June 6th is just moments away. But before we get into that, we would like to thank the following unions for jumping on board and bringing back the Ben Joravsky Show. First up, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A big thank you to those unions once again for jumping on board and helping bring back the Ben Joravsky Show. And of course, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. And this guy sitting right here, Bob Ryder. The Ben Joravsky Show, hour number 2, starts now. It is Thursday, June 6th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, President of the Chicago Federation of Labor, Bob Ryder, will join us, and we welcome political activist Ann Shaw. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Benny J. Ben Joravsky.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Back when I had a show, what was that radio station called?
WCP, you are fired.
Yeah, right. Yeah, WCP, get out of here. Bob Ryder was a regular on that show. He'd schlep all the way out to the northwest side, time after time, come in, start talking about rock and roll and stuff that I never heard of from the 1990s.
And today.
In the 80s.
Yeah, the 80s. The aughts.
The aughts.
Yeah.
The who? The what?
That's the
band.
band.
The aughts. Yeah.
That's the band at Lollapalooza this year.
Yes,
I never heard of him. But anyway, this is the first time he's making his appearance on this show that he had a big part in helping to save. So we got Bob Ryder sitting there. We're going to bring him on, talk about all the issues of the day.
So at some point, we're going to need to do a deep dive on how this actually happened, like this room here happened.
And that banner.
That banner. Nice banner, by the way.
Yeah.
Not bad. They spelled it right.
Yeah, they got the show.
By the way,
SHOW.
That's a San Diego hat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking as I walked in and looked at it, it'd be cool if we turned that S into another D and had like a Daredevil hat.
Oh,
like
okay.
Like
all right.
Red, like Daredevil hat.
Cool.
No,
super cool.
and also Dr. D.
It could be Dr. D. But I think one of the things that we failed to do when, we went and found the people to help support the show and went and talked to Chris Fusco and Tracy Baim and Nakia about putting this all together, we should have figured out a better budget so we could get some actual music and not this.
Oh, you didn't
Hey,
like that
what do you
song?
don't like that music? He comes
look
in,
at this
starts
thing. Look at
complaining
this.
about the
It's on air
music. And we got it on the air line. We got
Oh, my
hooks. We're gonna
Lord.
put that poster back up.
The one that fell off the
fell
wall.
off the wall.
Okay, you're being a little too honest here, boys.
It's like being at WKRP.
Yeah, well, I always say it's a little like Wayne's World in this room. All right, we got a Wayne's World vibe going here.
Hey, what the listeners at home don't know is we're actually in Ben's mom's basement.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's very Wayne's World feel here. But yeah, we'll talk about how this show was saved. And there's some names. I don't know if all the names want to be recognized.
Well,
but
I
one of
talked
them-
to one of them actually on my way here to make sure I could use her name.
Okay.
And she's been a guest. I don't know if you've had her as a guest since you've been on in this format, but when Fred Eichner's folks decided to walk you in at the end of one of your shows and tell you see you bye.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we know, you needed some time to like digest. It didn't take long before you, myself, and one Joanna Klonsky started to talk about how we could keep Ben's name out there. And there was this petition drive that Joanna helped spearhead, that a letter drive. We all signed on to this letter. I actually remember the places I was at when we were having these conversations, because my mother-in-law, we were at this place that she has down south of Joliet, and my whole family's in another part of the house, and I'm like pacing in the basement like I was probably 2 years before that, dealing with like putting together the deal to save the Sun-Times. Now I went from saving the Sun-Times to saving the Ben Joravsky show. Yeah. And it was amazing, because we had to, first thing I had to do on my end was, and last time I did this, I had cover because Jorge was president of the CFL, and I was just like, hey, I'm gonna go do this, so can you give me some cover in case I piss somebody off? Hey, by the way, this was something I wanted to clear up at the beginning. We're not on radio, so I can.
You can swear,
for sure.
Yeah, I can swear.
Are there any words? Let's go through this George Carlin list. Is there anything I can't say? I mean, not that I'm not known for using colorful language. Jake Lewis is over there like, oh yeah, right.
Monroe Anderson, who's a regular on the show, has violated every single
filthy sailor.
Ricky Hendon has violated. I'm trying to think about. I believe Joanna Klonsky
on a weekly basis. Maya Dukmasova.
Oh,
she's great.
I know she kills it every Tuesday. So she comes on, and I just. Really trying not to swear. It's just something, Dennis told me this.
That's the rule.
That's the rule. Treat it like it's on radio. And and actually we're on radio, Lumpin' Radio. We take the best of shows. So like if you were to swear, we put you on Lumpin' Radio, we'd have to delete but whatever.
Oh, can you just do like one of those beep?
Yeah, we'd have to go back and do that.
Right. So anyway, your sponsor, the union sponsors, I called through. And a lot of them had worked with you on the other show, and had a lot of respect for you and what you brought to the table. To the person, it was easy. I talked to the folks at IBW Local 9, the folks at Local 150, the folks from the Machinists Union, and it just, I'm probably going to miss a whole bunch of them, but I talked to all of them, and they wanted to be a part of the relaunch of this show. And obviously, I worked with I'm a dabbler, right? I dabble on the business side of things and the structural side of things, and I had to work with the folks here at the Chicago Sun-Times and at the Chicago Reader, which, ironically enough, and this point wasn't lost on any of us as I'm sitting there meeting with everybody. This is like the first successful joint venture between the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Reader. Yeah. And they used to be part of the same company. Yeah. Right? So how about that?
Well, and it was there was like I got fired on December 27th, I want to say.
Yep.
And then February 27th was our first show. So like 2 months of utter anguish. Like, is this thing coming back? Is it going to be bugging Bob? Do you
remember we were going to do that thing where you were going on you were going to go on something at the Hideout.
Yeah, I remember
we
very well.
We were going to pull like a Monday night Nitro like gimmick that we were.
Yeah, you were going to come, hey, and then you're like, the day of you canceled. The day of you canceled.
Yeah,
that was a big deal because I had to go to the Hideout. It wasn't for my regular First Tuesday show. It was Mark Bazer's show, and I forget when that was, but it was like the first time I was making like a public appearance. It's really weird when you get publicly fired. People treat you like you're dead, but oh my God, I love you and I miss you, and well, I'm still here. I haven't died, but that's kind of how people try. I don't know if you've ever been fired from anything, so they were just going to make this.
I've had some people try to run me out of town, but I've never actually been fired. Not yet.
I think, it's an interesting thing to go through a public.
I think about it all the time, though.
Yeah, but being publicly run out of town and publicly fired.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty big mouth, so I'm probably going to get way out there up over my skis today, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the challenge that you have is that you have a very diverse coalition of unions. And everybody knows this.
Yeah.
A lot of different interests, a lot of different occupations, different philosophies, different attitudes, and you have to more or less give the appearance that everybody is on the same page, even if they're not.
Well, you know
that's
what?
Everybody
is on the same page on some key principles. the labor movement's important. The working class economy is important. Lifting up people from the working poor to the middle class is important, because the working class, remember, is the working poor and the middle class, right? So the working, raising and protecting the working class and giving people economic opportunity and looking for equity across the board. Everybody's cool with that. And I got to tell you, as divergent as the labor movement is or can be or it appears to be, myself and my team, and let me tell you, I've got Don Villar, who's our Secretary Treasurer, comes out of the broadcast news. He was president of NABET, CWA NABET Local 41. He was a news writer producer for Channel 7. I've got Nora K. Ryan, who's our chief of staff, used to be our communications director. She would rip down the city to fight for the working people. It's amazing. And she's someone who grew up in the suburbs and grew up with, around a lot of conservative people, and she's one of the most progressive folks that we have working in our office. I've got my Director of External Affairs, Sharice Williams, who ran for county board.
Who's sitting in that chair about 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago.
Sharice has an amazing story. If she ever comes on and talks about her personal story and why she ran for office. Mm-hmm. You've got Andrea Kluger, who is who's our political and legislative director. This woman has a master's degree from Northwestern and decided to come and work in the labor movement and be part of the struggle to raise standards for everybody else. She could be doing anything. In fact, she's been recruited for other jobs and she wants to stay right there at the CFL. And of course, we've got jumping Jake Lewis, who's our communications director, who is Bruce Rauner's personal social media troll, right? And that and all the other staff.
Hey, for our teachers.
That guy?
that Rauner? Who?
Okay.
So, and then we have all the other folks on our staff, Elaine and Lisa, and I just want I'm taking the opportunity to talk about our organization. I know a lot of people, personify organizations and the people who are structurally at the top, but we're a very collaborative organization. Except when we go to pick the menu for our Labor Day event, then the collaboration all starts to end, and it's Bob making decisions for everyone else.
You mean you pick what you're going to do. Then it becomes a tyranny of one.
Yep.
Dee, before we take a further deep dive with Bob, you have an update for us?
Absolutely,
I might have cut you off.
No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, let's do this. Bob Ryder seemed like a pulled pork kind of guy for lunch. Am I right? No? Maybe? All right, people. Illinois has a new budget. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed it in Chicago Wednesday, and as suspected, yes, our Illinois friends of the conservative persuasion are weighing in, and they're not happy, all right? They're making this new budget and Pritzker out to be the worst thing our state has ever seen. Surprise, surprise. The following comes from the Dispatch Argus out of downstate Taylorville, Illinois. Ben loves Taylorville.
Taylorville. I know Taylorville.
You've been to Taylorville?
Oh, yeah. I went to college with a kid from Taylorville, and the Secretary Treasurer of the Illinois AFL-CIO, Tim Drace from Taylorville. That's right. Yep.
There you go. Dee, you ever been to Taylorville?
I've drove past it on 55.
Where is Taylorville?
Off of Highway 55.
Oh,
downstate.
that tells me
near
a lot.
Springfield.
Yeah, Taylorville. I've been to Taylorville.
I heard you planned on vacationing there this summer.
Yeah. James Taylorville.
Again, Ben's trying to troll Taylorville now, and everyone's pretty familiar with Taylorville.
I really have a hard time, Bob, getting out of the city of Chicago a lot of times. So,
that's because you only own a bike.
I rode my bike today, by the way. That's a whole other story.
The following comes from the Dispatch Argus out of downstate Taylorville, Illinois. Here we go. As suspected, the devilish details. Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. As suspected, the devilish details lurking in the mass of legislation approved by the 101st Illinois General Assembly continue to emerge. Today's unwelcome example hikes statewide costs for funding teacher and administrator pensions. It was tucked, as such surprises often are, into the omnibus bill that implements the $40 billion budget for the fiscal year that begins July 1st. The move cuts in half what... Okay, I'm done. You get it.
Wait, what are they complaining about?
The move cuts in half what taxpayers statewide will save from so-called pension thresholds. The goal of such thresholds is to reduce the cost to taxpayers statewide when school boards give big raises to educators at the end of their careers, so they will receive bigger lifetime state-funded pensions than they would otherwise have earned.
Okay.
They're pretending that something was hitting in the budget, but this, can I use this as a transition to something that I think is a great narrative? So we're working on two things right now. Unfinished business with this Fair Work Week ordinance that we've been working on in the labor movement in coalition with other folks for 2 years, that I've been working attentively on the last few months. And also, we're starting to launch our campaign to move the minimum wage to $15 by 2021. So in an effort to be as transparent as possible, I want to specifically let people know as it pertains to this Fair Work Week ordinance, and by that I want to talk directly to the Illinois Hospital Association and also to the folks that are in the temp agency world, that we are going to pass this ordinance. They are going to be covered industries that if they want to sit down at the table and talk about concerns and collaborate, that's fine, but no one's waiting around for them to do it. All right. I don't want there to be any mistake about it, because I don't want the conservatives or the or folks from the IHA or from any of these other groups to think that somehow that we're going to bury this, because we're not. We've been very upfront, and I think our new mayor's been very upfront, specifically on those in healthcare. She relates her own personal story with her mother. This ordinance revolves around predictive scheduling.
All right, now let's take it at this top, because there's two separate issues that you raised, the minimum wage issue and the Fair Work Week. Talk about the Fair Work Week one first.
Okay. That one I'm going to let's talk about minimum wage first, because I think that's a quicker discussion, and I want to be able to, I don't want it to get lost, because when I get going on this Fair Work Week thing, man, I'm going to start rolling. Minimum wage is real simple. And, labor markets are tight anyway. It shouldn't hurt anybody here in Chicago. Folks are starting in jobs at $15 an hour. Just get on board. Let's do it. $15 by 2021. If we don't do this, we're going to start falling behind the state, because the way our legislation here in the city ramps up is different. The state has a ramp to 15 by 2024, 2025. And one, that sweeps in the whole state. We have a different economy. People downstate argue, oh, we shouldn't, we're not Chicago, blah, blah, blah. No, get it. We get it. You're right. Things are different between Chicago and downstate. Chicago needs to be at $15 a lot sooner. That's how we're going to fix that. What they see is like the disparity in economies. We get it. We're going to make Chicago $15 first. The Chicago ordinance was designed to get to $13 and then put in a capped cost of living increase that caps out at 2.5%. Mm-hmm. We need to have a better ramp. That ramp would fall in order to get to $15 in the city. It could theoretically take longer than it would to get for the state. Mm-hmm. But we're not even worried about that, because we think we need to have $15 a lot sooner as it is. So we're going to do it 4 years earlier here in Chicago. That ordinance is going to be likely introduced next Wednesday, and it involves a deep coalition of folks, a lot of whom were involved in the statewide minimum wage fight, and we're excited to be a part of it. I don't want to get too much further ahead of the coalition, because when it comes to that issue specifically, I think the minimum wage workers, whose voices are important in that fight, I think we need to really listen to them first. So we're going to put a pin in that. This is your preview. There's going to be a lot more coming on the $15 minimum wage, and I would ask you and all the other folks out there that want to talk about this issue, listen to the workers. The businesses are not going to be harmed or devastated or anything like that. Listen to the workers. They're the ones that are shouldering the harm.
Are you getting phone calls and complaints from aldermen who live in wards that are in the outer edges of the city that border suburbs. I've heard this complaint from like the Matt O'Shea in the 19th Ward, Anthony Napolitano's from the 41st Ward. Aldermen whose districts, whose wards just are bordering towns that are not affected by the minimum wage, that they're afraid they're going to lose business in Chicago if we impose a higher minimum wage in the city. Do you get those kinds of complaints?
The labor markets are tight. They're starting to pay people more as it is. This is not going to have the effect that they think it is. We have not started having those specific conversations. That campaign is just starting to ramp up now. But the conversations I am having and actively having is around this Fair Work Week. So the folks around this Fair Work Week, and this is all about predictive scheduling. This is giving people, do you know right now that folks who are, that live in like this, what I call the working poor, the people who are struggling to make it every day, they find themselves in situations where they show up to work, they've arranged childcare, right? So they've got their kids in childcare, they've eaten their transportation costs, they show up to work and they go, sorry, we can't use you today. Now, these aren't people who just are showing up for some random day of work. These are people that are scheduled to work and their employer is changing their schedule, right? Now, maybe for some people, they look at that and go, days pay here. Who are those people? Because I haven't met them. This is important to everybody. But think about it. Think about it, what it means to those people who are the most vulnerable. And, the lower the amount of wage you bring home, the less capacity you have to absorb that type of calamity, right? And I say calamity, oh, that's dramatic. This is the real deal. Imagine your gross income for the week is $500, right? $500 a week. That's what, about $25,000 a year, right? So you're making what now the current minimum wage is roughly, and that's if you get full-time hours. And you lop one day off of it because you show up. You've just lost. I mean, think about this. This is simple math. You've lost in one day 20% of your income for that week. That's messed up.
So what would this ordinance do?
Make sure that there's safeguards put in, that people have their schedules set well in advance. And if things happen that are arbitrary or that is just based on some decision that the employers make that isn't a true emergency, or an act of God. Let's talk about act of God. I'm going to get back into that in a second. That the employees get a minimum of some type of show up pay, right? And some industries have show up pay. And that's just, not necessarily making them whole, even to the extent that,
Wait, show up pay. Explain that. Show up pay full day's wage or like a kill fee?
Well, hang on. Do you? We're involved in a lot of negotiations right now, Ben. I don't want to throw everything out on the table. No, I'm kidding.
You want to play his? You don't want to play his cards here.
Yeah, but no, yeah. Show up pay is what it is. It's that you're compensated for showing up to work and having them call your schedule off. I come out of the heavy equipment industry, construction, and it's a regular term that if you show up to work and you have a rain day, you get compensated for showing up to work that day, right? Here's my point. This is about fairness and equity, and about getting people predictability. And you know who believes in this? Do you know which ward actually doesn't think this is the right thing to do? If you were to pick one ward out of the city where they think that this is a bad idea, could you tell me what it is?
Well, I'm going to make a guess. When you say ward, I'm going to guess you're talking about an alderman, not an actual.
No, a ward where we poll, because there's polling on this.
Oh,
great pollster, Jason McGrath. Jason did a poll on this.
Been on this show more than once. Which ward? You know what? Okay, the way you're setting this up, I would say it's a ward that's generally would probably a higher vote for Bruce Rauner. I'm going to go with the 43rd ward on the north side of Chicago, Lincoln Park.
Ben, if there's a ward that doesn't think this is a good idea, it's not in the city of Chicago, because every ward in the city of Chicago, this thing pulls off the charts. People think it makes sense. They think it makes sense, right?
But there must be some wards where it polls higher than in other wards.
Sure. But the thing is, you get Jason in here and ask him about it. Jason will tell you that this is one of the highest polling issues he's ever seen, right? It's just like minimum wage. That's an amazingly high polling issue, which is why at the end of the day, we were able to get the minimum wage campaign done. And J.B. Pritzker, who's smart and knows this and wants to be about the people, he backed it.
So you think that the Fair Work Week will have no trouble getting to the city council?
We've got 30 sponsors right now, and we have 30 sponsors with actual language that we've given them, right? Because some people say, "Oh, yeah, but they don't know." No, we gave them. Everybody's got this, and since the end of the last city council at the beginning of April, we have been going in and briefing aldermen. So we have 30 people signed on as co-sponsors of this ordinance who know what's in the ordinance, right? We got all those signatures done in about 2 days. Going into the last city council, I think we're pretty good. If our starting point is 30 aldermen supporting, which is well over 50% plus one, then I think we're in pretty good shape. I figure by the time we're done with this, do you remember when we passed the earned sick leave ordinance a couple years ago? Mm-hmm. Right? There was a point where we got so much aldermanic support for the earned sick leave ordinance that we ended up getting 49 votes. And the reason why we didn't get 50 votes is someone wasn't there that day. Right? This issue. So let me tell you, I jumped into myself, like personally, and us as an organization, we've been involved, we've been supportive. I jumped in at the end of April, and we were dealing with folks on the other side of the table. Some of them were great actors. Alderman O'Connor wanted us to go through a negotiating process. So we went through a very intense negotiating process with people in the business community. But some of the folks in the business community weren't actually coming to the table. It didn't feel like they were accepting that they were going to be covered by this ordinance.
I mean, they thought the ordinance would cover somebody else and they would be exempted? Is that what you're saying?
Let me give you specifically. The Illinois Hospital Association, they come up and say, first, you're going to hurt the safety nets. Okay, well, let's figure out something around the safety nets. Well, okay, but we're not for profits just generally. I mean, okay, come on. Look at the CEO pay to the not-for-profit hospitals, right? You guys are not for profit. You just what you would otherwise have as profits gets dumped into CEO pay. So let's okay, all right. So we've already knocked out the safety. Then they go to pandemics. Oh, what if we have a massive CTA crash or a terrorist? All right, let me tell you what I'll do for you. I will give you the most extensive act of God provision that I can come up with. They're like, well, you know what? Our employees don't want it. And then I love it. I love it when they go there. I'm like, really? Your employees don't want it? Yeah. You know, you want, yeah, we have people that are employees for 17 years. That's interesting. By the way, my mom was an emergency room nurse. And the reason why you have people that stay with you despite issues like this is because every single one of you is doing the exact same fucking thing.
Yep, he just broke the barrier.
Let me be clear about this. My mother is an emergency. I grew up in one of these houses. My mom worked midnights in the emergency room. She did some other things. She worked in healthcare a long time, and I'm pretty sure she would back me up on this issue, not because I'm her oldest son, but because we know people who work in this. And I have a lot of family that have worked in healthcare and worked in hospitals. Specifically, my grandmother worked in a hospital. Even more so is you look at who works in hospitals from top to bottom. The people who are the maintenance staff who clean the rooms, who work in the cafeterias. These are the same vulnerable people that work in all kinds of other sectors of our city. Mm-hmm. These are people of color. There is a lot of women who are trying to take care of families, maybe in single parent homes, and now they are living in this arbitrary environment when it comes to their scheduling. And that's not it. That's healthcare, right? And at the end of the day, to finish out that conversation, once I make this argument to them, they're like, well, we just don't want it. It's going to cost us too much money. Schedule your people properly and won't cost you a dime.
Yeah.
But that's not it. So I've got healthcare covered. I've got manufacturing. I got restaurants and hotels. I got the temp service agency. I mean, you look at the temp service, my number 2 officer at the CFL, Don Villar, he works very attentively on the temp service agencies and helping temp workers. So, and we had our meeting the other night. He's working with some of the folks from one of our affiliate unions. We've got a union shop down in the Stockyard district that they're trying to start to move temp workers into their place of employment, and the union's actually standing with the temp workers. UFCW 1546, which is actually the local that Jorge originally came out of. A lot of, as you know, working in the stockyards, a lot of Latinx employees, right? Mm-hmm. 57. I'm going to get this. I want to make sure I get this right because Jake and we're talking about this a little while ago. 57% of temp workers reported they were not paid the right number of hours. All right. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, that's wage theft.
You better believe that's wage
just
theft.
Wage theft.
And Ben, let me ask you a question. I know you're trying to move on, but let me ask you a question. Why do people bring temp workers into a workplace like a packing house?
Oh, so they don't have to pay them full benefits that they would have to pay workers who are on a regular employees. That's exactly why they make more money for them, less money for workers.
And why wouldn't they want them to have scheduling protections? Because they have them in there as a disposable workforce.
Oh, listen, this scheduling protection bill, you don't have to convince me of this thing. Should have been passed 10 years ago, for crying out loud.
Okay, we're building a time machine. We're passing it 10 years ago. Of course.
I mean, we've had a few problems with mayors who've not been as friendly as I think they should have been, or as appreciative as I think they should have been on labor issues over the last years. And I'm hopeful. I said this when the show began.
Did you see what Lori Lightfoot said to the Chamber of Commerce yesterday?
No, I'm telling you.
She said, get on board. She basically said, hey, business community, you're fine, but get on board with this.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm having a bit of an existential crisis because all these politicians are starting to sound like me. We got to take a break. We have Ann Shaw on deck. She's sitting here very patiently. We're going to bring her on when we return. Hey, playing now at Steppenwolf Theater, the world premiere of Ms. Black for President. It's inspired by the true, that's true as in it really happened, TRUE story of Joan Jett Black, America's first drag queen presidential candidate. You know who created it, D?
No.
It was created by Tony nominee Tina Landau.
Oh.
And you know who else created it?
No.
Oscar winner Terrell Alvin McCraney. You know him, Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
For tickets, visit steppenwolf.org. That's Steppenwolf, like the rock group from the 60s.
Hang tight, millennials. The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by the Northwestern Summer Writers Conference. Now in its 15th year, the 3-day conference held in Chicago features a diverse array of workshops, speakers, discussions, and readings. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/writers. Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit admiralx.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by Green Element Resale. It's located at 6241 North Broadway in Chicago. And guys, let me tell you, just believe me here, it's amazing. Furniture, appliances, lamps, books, clothes, electronics. Guys, it's a thrift shop, but it's the only thrift shop in Chicago that helps bring you the Ben Joravsky Show. So if you're ever on Broadway between Granville and Devon, do us a favor and tell them thank you. Thank you for being a part of the Ben Joravsky Show. Once again, it's Green Element Resale, 6241. That'll be North Broadway. And find more information at greenelementresale.com. Green Element Resale. Shop there now and save tons of money.
Yeah, man.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed. We're back live. Bob Ryder has left the building. But in his place, sitting right here across from me, is Ann Shaw. I know Ann is a political activist, political candidate here in the city of Chicago. I didn't realize this, Ann, until you told me today that you're on the board of the ACLU. Maybe you told me that previously and I forgot. And she's also on the board of the Asian American Coalition. We're going to be talking about House Bill 3394. Very interesting bill. The Tribune covered it. I don't know if I saw an article in the Sun-Times, but the Tribune covered it about the guarantee that minorities be on the boards of corporations in the state of Illinois. So we'll get into that issue and talk a lot of politics with Ann. But Dee, you got an update for me?
Just real quick here. First off, find us on social media at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, on Facebook and Twitter. Give us a like, follow, share, review, whatever you want to do. Oh, and hey, speaking of reviews, we have a little golden rule here on the Ben Joravsky Show. If you do give us a review, 5 stars only, okay?
Yeah, that's a good review.
That's
a good rule. Good rule.
Also on Apple Podcasts, you can give reviews as well. Feel free to do that. If you listen on the live stream, I always mean to mention this, and I always forget to. If you listen on the live stream or watch us on the live stream, give it the thumbs up, would you? Click like, subscribe, do all that good stuff too. All right, we have an update here nationally. It says here, okay, we got a Nancy Pelosi update, I believe. Oh, we got a Bernie Sanders update. Bernie Sanders sends us a support to unionized Vox Media staffers who are on a one-day walkout today to demand a contract. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, or as Ben calls him,
Pete Buttigieg.
We have fun with that one. Pete Buttigieg has a lot of kind words for Stacey Abrams at the DNC's African American Leadership Summit per CNN. Go check that out online. Looking for that Pelosi update. Here we go. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi declined to criticize Donald Trump at Normandy earlier today per CNN, saying she will not discuss the president while on foreign soil.
Made some comments this morning about the tariffs. What are your thoughts on that moving forward?
I don't talk about the president when I have a country. That's my principle.
So there you go.
All right, that's some old school stuff there.
Yeah.
The notion is, folks, that the president of the United States, when he or she is out of the country, we, as showing our unity as a people, should refrain from criticizing that president. Of course, this particular president has violated every protocol that has ever existed, so he feels free to trash whoever he wants to, wherever he is.
Yep.
It's funny you say that because today, like we mentioned earlier, Trump did an interview with that Laura Ingraham lady on Fox News. And during the interview, in the backdrop is the cemetery at Normandy. And Donald Trump calls Nancy Pelosi Nervous Nancy and called her a disaster.
Yeah. So Nancy, see, here's the thing, Ann Shaw. I'd love to get your thoughts on this one. Ann Shaw has been around politics for a while in the city of Chicago. I always have a difficulty trying to understand how the Democrats can prevail by playing by the old rules when the Republicans have ripped up the rule book and don't even pretend to play by the rules. Now, we played earlier J.B. Pritzker, new Governor J.B. Pritzker, talking about how it's a new day and age in Illinois. We're all going to work together. It's going to be bipartisan support. He talked about how he had support of the leader of the Republican, what is it, in the State House, Jim Durkin from DuPage County. Yeah. And he's saying the right things. Bruce Rauner never pretended.
No.
He just shredded up the notion of working together. And, of course, Donald Trump feels free to go anywhere and say anything derogatory about Democrats. So do you think the Democrats are at a disadvantage when they try to play by these old rules when the Republicans clearly have no intention of doing so?
Yeah. I mean, is it Einstein that said that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? So, I mean, we've already played that out more than once. I don't even understand it. In fact, there was a really good New York Times op-ed piece about one of my top candidates for president, Elizabeth Warren. And I can't remember the gentleman's last name, but he basically said that he wants to live in a world where Elizabeth Warren is, or Elizabeth Warren's world. And in it, he actually criticizes that it looks like the DNC is just fighting to fight Trump, like find a candidate and focus on Trump. And he's saying that doesn't work. It's almost childish. And it's time that we actually look at policies. And I think people are really open to it. And I know the rules in politics for candidates is that people don't vote because of policies. I mean, that's kind of sadly the truth. People like you and I, we do, but most voters don't. And because they find it boring. And I actually witnessed that when I was on the campaign trail for a state rep. When people asked me, how do we fix the pensions? And I actually explained to them how their eyes literally, I saw it glaze over. And they just were like, I'm done. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to stop talking because you're not even paying attention.
Yeah.
But I feel like people are actually paying attention to Elizabeth Warren now. And I don't know if that's because of Trump, because he's so childish and so over the top that people are, I think they're kind of getting, I'm hoping they're getting tired of it. But it's incumbent upon us as the voters, and I just don't know, to kind of push for candidates like that and demand more and pay attention more. And I'm just kind of a little worried because I feel like we're kind of playing into that hand again. And I don't know when we're going to stop.
We're playing into what hand?
To this notion that we have to, keep playing on, what's the word? I hate to say it like this, but go high. Well, they're going low and constantly winning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think Illinois has always been a kind of a good barometer for the rest of the country. Kind of like what happens here kind of almost plays out. So, I mean, we did get rid of Rauner. It was a monumental effort. But a lot of it was based on messages like the fair income tax and progressive messages of Medicare for all, which we had talked about earlier, how important health care. I mean, I believe it's the number one issue in the United States because it's literally, killing people in our country. People are going without medicine and dying because of it. They're going without medical care, or they're being saddled with so much debt. I mean, even in my own family, we had a major health crisis, and we have, decent health insurance, actually good health insurance, and we still ended up with thousands of dollars in medical bills that we're still paying off. So it affects everybody. And if you think, oh, I'm fine today, you could be that person talking to a bankruptcy lawyer because you could have a medical catastrophe that you didn't anticipate. And so we need to look out for each other and not always be like, oh, it's all about me.
Well, I completely agree with you about the importance of Medicare for all, or health care for all, whatever you want to call it. We talk about this all the time on this show. And I do believe it's a winning issue for the Democrats. I do believe I also think that finally this country is confronting the fact that we have to, how do I do this? Break through the stereotypes we have about such a plan. People in their own minds, it's socialism, or they're afraid of it. So Donald Trump can undercut it by just saying Venezuela. You should talk about a country that's really struggling right now, Venezuela. And the Democrats want to impose a Venezuelan plan on you. And it's almost you get what I'm saying?
Right.
And then people react. They have a knee-jerk reaction. Democrats run away from it then because they're afraid of having to look like they're too left, and so they give up the fight before they even engage to fight. And that, to me, has been sort of how my beloved Democratic Party has been going about things for my entire adult lifetime, I want to say.
I mean, I'm just going to say it. A lot of our Democratic leadership were Republicans like 30, 40 years ago. So that's part of the issue. We're dealing with different shades of, conservatism and being a moderate. And I'm not saying I'm against that, because I like the idea. I like all kinds of ideas. But, if you look at other countries, we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have a national health care plan. Every other country, like Great Britain, has had it for decades and decades. Taiwan, I have friends in various parts of Europe that post about it. Like, for instance, I had a friend who broke his arm. He went to the emergency room. He waited 10 minutes. And they saw him right away, did x-rays right away. They brought in a specialist within 10 minutes to look at it. They cast him, and then they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. You're not on our plan yet, so you're going to have to pay the cost. But you can actually claim it on your own insurance until you get on it." So what the cost was $100.
That was it.
That's what he had to pay. That's below his own deductible. And on top of it, he had an appointment the next week with the specialist. So here, people the arguments against national health care is like, oh, well, there's death panels. There's no such death panels. I haven't found one yet. Yeah. There's death panels in our country, believe it or not. When insurance companies, and that's part of my living. I'm a civil rights attorney as well, and this is going to sound bad, but I do like to sue insurance companies, and I have, where they have made decisions not to provide critical health care, and they're not supposed to make medical decisions, but they find ways around it, and causes people to die. Those are our modern death panels.
All right. Now, before I get too far down the road on a healthcare conversation, I've had so many of them over the last few days. The first time I interviewed you, I don't know if you remember this, you were running for alderman. I think it was the 1st Ward.
Oh, wow.
And that was a few years back. And you ran against Proco Joe, who was an entrenched incumbent at the time. You came very close to forcing him into a runoff.
Yes.
I think it was a handful of votes.
Yeah, it was like 80 some votes.
And that was the year 2015.
Yep.
I want to say.
Wow, you have a good memory.
Yeah, I know. It's really coming. I don't know where I'm pulling it from, Aunt Shaw. And now here we are, 2019. Proco Joe lost.
Yeah.
God.
It's about time.
Proco Joe lost. There's a new alderman in the ward who is a Democratic socialist.
Yep, my good friend.
And we have a mayor of City of Chicago, new mayor of City of Chicago, who in many instances sounds like me.
Yeah,
it's really difficult for me to deal with this. I said earlier I'm having an existential crisis. What about yourself? When you look at these changes, I realize we have a long way to go.
Right.
But are you encouraged, or are you perpetually a glass is half empty person that you see something disillusioning in it all, or what? How are you dealing with this?
So I firmly believe if you're somebody that runs for office, you are a crazy optimist, right? Because you really want to make change and you think you can get it done. And so I am an optimist. I'm really excited because when I ran, there's a group of us, especially these women, including Alderman Sue Garza, back in 2014. We actually even met even before then to kind of talk about what we're going to do. And we tried to create this coalition. And most of us in that initial coalition didn't win, but we really pushed that agenda. Many of us became activated and went out there. So Sue was our big win. We were so excited. I love her to death. I actually saw her yesterday.
10th Ward.
Yeah, sorry, 10th Ward Alderman. And so
Alderwoman.
Well, it hasn't been changed yet. So it's
I learned this from Sue Garza. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Sue Garza told me early on she wants to be called Alderwoman because she is a woman, so I respect her on that.
No, she should be, and same with Marie Haddon. They should be called Alderwoman. And actually, that's something that needs to be changed in the state legislature. So that was something I had been pushing for back 5 years ago, but I leave it up to these women to do it. But no, I'm very, very excited. I'm like you. I'm like kind of like, whoa, now what? It's like,
I know.
wow.
Yeah.
Like we've been fighting so hard.
Yeah.
It's like the dam's been opened up and we're just like flooded now. So I'm really excited that like a little over 10% of our city council is, Democratic Socialist, one of which is my alderman. What I am kind of sad about, and one of the things why I want to be on your show today, is the fact that Amaya Pawar, who was the 47th Ward alderman, he stepped down and didn't run again. And he was our first and only Asian American elected to the city council. So we have made great strides on the state legislature. We got our first Asian American, our good friend Ram Villavalam. I think he was here on your show.
He was on the show, yeah.
And I just talked to him too. And he's our first Asian American in the Senate. We had Teresa Ma, who made history as our first state representative. We also have Jen Gong Gershowitz. And we have gotten some great Asian American elected officials. We have Holly Kim out in Lake County, who lost the Mundelein mayoral race by 5 votes and then turned around like within 30 days and ran for Lake County treasurer, and she won. And so I'm really excited. She's a close friend of mine. And so that is my, my little bittersweet feeling about the city council is that we don't have that progressive Asian American voice.
Well, let's talk about this. I don't know if we ever had a progress Asian American
okay.
voice. I mean, when you put that adjective of progressive in the sentence.
I don't even really like that word.
Yeah, let's keep progressive out of that one for a while.
Sure.
And let's just talk about Asian Americans running for office in the political process. You and I had this conversation. Well, let's just recreate it for the listeners. It was a pretty good one. I made the note when Ram was in here, not Rahm Emanuel.
No, the other one.
The other Ram, the good Ram.
Good Ram.
There's a good Ram and a bad Ram.
Take a chill pill, man.
Yeah, okay, Ram. That's the bad Ram. But he was saying that we were talking about the fact that Indian Americans were leading the pack. Let's see, there was state senator.
Yep.
And there was the alderman, the only alderman, Amaya Pawar.
Well, and then we also have the Indo-American Democratic Organization, which is the oldest Asian American PAC in Illinois, and they've always been supportive of me, and they have been really some of the pioneers in Asian American political empowerment. There's been a number of other people, and so we did talk about that, like, well, why
Indian Americans as opposed to Korean Americans or Chinese Americans, etc.
So it's really interesting. So it shows that a lot of people don't understand our community, even within I have to use the word progressive or communities, right, or on our side, right? And so it's because there's not, first of all, we're the fastest growing minority group. And we're right now about 5% of the population growing, but we're also incredibly diverse. So Asian means like East Asians, like people from China, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asians, like Vietnamese. We also have Filipinos, and then we have Pakistanis and Indians, right? And so we have to look at their background and culture. So India, a lot of people don't realize, is the world's largest democratic country in the world. I said that twice, but and so in English is kind of like their, and I'm sure Ram will correct me. I think it's like one of their official languages. I know they have multiple. So when they come to the United States, they already have that kind of background of protesting and voting and speaking out and running, and anybody can run. And yes, they've got their issues, but other countries not so much. And Ben and we talked about earlier, like people literally will get killed. So I mean, like in a lot of these East Asian countries, they don't just, this is in history, and I'm not going to single out a country like China, and I'm talking about thousands of years ago. They don't just kill you for protesting, but they'll go and kill your entire family and anybody related to you. That's how scary it is. So when you do actually see people in these East Asian countries protest in their country, they really had no choice. And because whatever it is a matter of life and death. So when they come to this country, it's kind of like us feeling like, oh my gosh, we have all these democratic socialists and we have Lori Lightfoot. Like, whoa, now what? So it's like, it's kind of a new process. So we have a language issue too, because a lot of these East Asian countries, they speak a completely different language. So we've got to get along, learn the language, understand the system. There are some people afraid that if they speak up or even vote, that they might end up on some government watch list where they could get arrested one day at any moment. So, and I don't mean to simplify it like that. So there's kind of like that idea. But, the Chinese American community has been here for, I think we're one of the oldest Asian communities in the United States. We actually helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, which opened up the West to the rest of the United States and actually helped us come together as a nation. But, it's for the last 50 years, there have been a handful of Asian Americans have been fighting to so that people know this. A lot of it's kind of erased from American history. And I have to give a shout out to State Representative Teresa Ma, because she actually introduced legislation to teach that to children in Illinois, which is huge, because if we don't learn our history, then we've got some issues down the road, which brings me to House Bill 3394. So because a lot of people are not, either don't have direct contact with Asian Americans or Asian American issues or really understand us, I understand there's some perceptions that, we talked about this before about the affirmative action, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this perception that, we tend to lean right and we're, being used, and we're opposed to, other communities that we actually work intimately with, like the African American community and the Hispanic community. I know for sure that I have been doing that for, my whole entire adult career. Mm-hmm. And so HB 3394, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is an amendment to the Business Corporation Act. And basically it used to require, it's actually been changed, but it used to require that any publicly traded companies that are headquartered in Illinois had to have a seat for an African American person on their board and a woman, and then they added Hispanics. So the controversy for our community is that we were not included as Asian Americans. So it's not that we were against it. So I know there's that perception that we were against it. We weren't against it because we are for, at least our group, we're for inclusion, and we think that this is a way to start getting that inclusion, because there's definitely highly qualified people who are of these different backgrounds who should be on corporate boards, and I think it actually is better that even a publicly held company should be reflective of their customers and of the people, because then they can actually improve their company. So we actually wanted to be included in that. So that's really what it was about, is being included on it. And so there was a lot of misunderstanding about who Asian Americans are, who do we represent, are we represented, those kinds of issues. So it's kind of a learning process for us.
Did the bill get amended to add Asian Americans?
So what ended up happening was the bill got completely revamped. And so instead, and I wasn't part of the revamping process. So how it got revamped was basically now it's like these corporations have to report on the makeup of their boards and break it down by minority groups. And we are actually, Asian Americans and Pacific Americans are added into the reporting requirements, along with women, African Americans, and Hispanics. And I think that's a huge, important step to gathering data. And it's a way to kind of, and it's, I had nothing to do with that change. All we wanted was to be added to the bill that, Representative Welch had.
Chris Welch.
Yeah, had sponsored. So and I just want to make sure that, and I appreciate you giving me this platform to explain that, hey, we're not against the other groups. We want to be included.
With the other groups.
Yeah, exactly, not forgotten.
All right, that's Ann Shaw and Ben Joravsky. We'll be right back after this.
Cirque du Soleil's Big Top comes back to Chicago with its latest show, Volta. Venture into a captivating voyage of discovery inspired by the adventurous spirit of freedom, where a surge of action sparks a high-voltage journey. Volta. Playing May 18th through July 6th under the Big Top at Soldier Field. Tickets at CirqueDuSoleil.com. Volta thanks their partners Hennessy Black and Champagne Nicolas Lafayette.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, man, take us home.
Yeah. That super cool music means we're coming to the end of another super cool show, but not done yet. Ann Shaw is sitting here, and not only is she a lawyer, not only is she on the board of directors of the ACLU, not only is she in the board of directors of the Asian American Coalition, not only did she stand up for Asian American rights in Springfield on HB 3394, but she plays one heck of an organ, all right?
I knew that was her.
Yeah, man, that Ann Shaw, you bring her in the studio, she just starts playing the organ.
Oh, yeah. Multi-talented.
Wow.
All right. Dee, you had a question that you wanted to relay to Ann.
Absolutely, I do. But first, I had to find my copy, and now I got this. We need to talk about Ben's favorite thing: candles.
Candles.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. After 5 years in Andersonville, Murray and White, they've made the difficult decision to close their doors, but act now because everything in the store is now on sale. Notable candles. Maybe 20% off. I say maybe because we've learned in the last few weeks here that our host, Ben Joravsky, is absolutely insane about candles. We found out that he loves peppermint candles. That's his favorite scent. And what was that scent you told us about yesterday?
Cannabis candles.
Cannabis candles.
I'm really trying to say the right word, and I've learned all my life I called it reefer,
good.
and now people are like, Ben, it's cannabis. So
Yeah. You usually light a candle to get rid of the smell of cannabis, but Ben prefers cannabis candles.
Cannabis candles.
Ann's looking like,
I don't know.
what
I
the?
think reefer is easier than cannabis.
Thank you.
I'm
You're the
good
first
with
person who
reefer.
signed on to reefer.
Hey, you should come in more often.
Yeah.
All right, so we got Veluspa and Nest fragrance brand candles, 20% off maybe because Ben may have bought them all. Let's see here. We also got rugs. They're 30% off in-store and new orders through June 1st. All floor samples furniture, 30 to 50% off. Antique furniture pieces, 40 to 50% off. Pillows, 40% off. Picture frames, 40% off. So much. Basically, the entire store is discounted, all right? Once again, Murray and White in Andersonville. Unfortunately, after 5 years in Andersonville, they have made the decision to close their doors, but everything now is on sale. Maybe the candles. Ben may have bought them all. Cannabis candles. I don't think that's a real thing. Okay, now to the live stream.
All right.
All right, our good friend Steven weighed in here, and he says, Dr. D. Oh, hey, Steven, not a doctor. Can you ask our guest if she considers herself a person of color? As an Asian person myself, I don't always know how this works.
All right.
So that's a good question. So, yeah, I do. We are people of color, as that definition goes. But with that said, being an East Asian, and we have to, in my opinion, we have to acknowledge that we do have some privilege. I mean, that's the truth. And when we acknowledge that, we can be better partners with various communities, and also be better. We really need to do better about reaching out to other communities, and that's something Ram Villavelam, good Ram.
Good Ram.
Good Ram.
The other one wasn't so good at reaching out to others.
I think we should just we should just call him Good Ram.
Yeah.
So Good Ram, and I had talked about because we've had this voice for decades, but it's just like, now it just takes that long when you're a small group and you're largely forgotten, and people don't really understand you, and they have their own issues, and they don't feel like they need to take, or they even think about kind of understanding what your issues are. And I think it really helps all of us to understand each other better because we're all going to live together. I mean, there's more and more of us. In fact, if you talk about world population, there's probably more Asians in the world than any other group. So, so to answer the question, Steve, right?
Yeah.
I do consider myself a person of color. The Asian American activists that I work with, we are included in that. But we do recognize that we do have some privilege.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing going back to Indian Americans is that Amaya Pawar was elected alderman. I talked to Ram when he was the good Ram.
Good Ram.
Bill of Alam. The bad Ram has never been on this show, so
okay.
The good Ram. Bill
I would
of
have
Alam.
paid to listen to that. I would have been like, I'll pay to sit in the corner.
You too?
Corner. Yeah, I mean.
That would have been
should
fun
have
to
Burke on
interview.
here.
Wait, what's that, Mayor Ram?
Take a chill pill, man.
Oh yeah, that Mayor Ram.
I
Yeah.
knew you'd say
Chill
that.
pill Ram. But we talked about this. Amaya Pawar ran an award that was overwhelmingly not Asian. I don't know what white people's generally, you call them the 47th Ward, not many black people in the 47th Ward. And it used to be a strong contingent of Hispanics, but through gentrification,
But they got Matt Martin.
They got Matt Martin. So, okay, the 47th Ward is pretty open-minded if you just view it in terms of ethnic voting patterns. But again, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any ward or district in the city of Chicago that in and of itself is overwhelmingly Asian American so that it would just almost automatically elect an Asian American person as their representative, their alderman, their state rep, what have you. I believe that if the way ethnic residential patterns have emerged, an Asian American is going to have to be elected by appealing to voters who are not Asian American.
So you are like very, very on point on this. So in the continental United States, there really is not a majority Asian district. If you go to Hawaii, that's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. So the reality is Asian Americans cannot currently be elected, and somebody out there is probably going to correct me, but as far as the last thing I know, the research I know is that we are normally elected by we have to appeal to other groups. We have to be a candidate where people don't look at us as Asian. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive and weird. So when I ran, it's we had a lot of, my district is very mixed, and I love my state rep. I love Delia Ramirez. She's really amazing. She's totally exceeded any expectations I already had, which was already pretty high for her. So if she's ever going to listen to this, I hope she laughs at that. But she's done amazing
And you guys ran
things.
against each other.
We did, but and it's weird because we were kind of working together on stuff before we ran, and we actually talked. So it was a very it's always been kind of a strange race. But I'm always more about the issues and moving forward. But going back to Asian Americans, so we have Stephanie. I think Stephanie Chu or Chang from Michigan. She was the first Asian American elected, and she lives in a majority black district in Detroit. And so she was the first Asian to be elected. And Teresa Ma, she ran in the 2nd district of Illinois. And that district actually was carved to have a majority minority Asian district. So it has some of the largest numbers of Asian Americans concentrate, but she's still, it's still like 70% Hispanic. So so she couldn't rely completely on the Asian vote, but it did help her a lot because of her running, and this is why it's important, because of her running, so many, people used to say, oh, Chinese people, Asian people, they don't vote, but because they don't have a candidate that reached out to them, that actually reached out to them and say, hey, this is in Chinese, come vote, and go out and get their vote. And she got a boost from that massive Chinese vote.
I actually disagree with that premise. Just want to say, just to interrupt you, Danny Solis, the alderman of the 25th Ward, was elected by voters in Chinatown year after year after year. So if it wasn't for those voters who voted for Danny Solis,
that's a dark side of politics.
You know what? And no ethnic group is perfect with who they represent. I just want to know who they vote for.
Without getting into that, maybe you'll have Teresa on. Maybe she might be willing to talk about it. I'm not going to put it on her to do that. That's a very complicated issue with Danny. As we know, he he is a mole and should be indicted, but I don't even know where he is. Like, where in the world is Danny Solis?
Hold on. Oh, he's not under the table.
Oh, thank God.
Danny, I think, is witness protection. Although I did
Yeah.
see there was a picture of him at some. I don't know if it was a real. There was a photo that was on the internet. Do you see this? Where he's supposed to some Social Security office in Pilsen. I do not.
I
know
did
if-
not see it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know where he is.
Yeah, I
but
don't know.
it's kind of. I mean, so it's. We have ideas, and I do believe that if we look at different communities, what they grew up with, their experiences, I think we should try something new, and we should always listen to what other views are. And when you have somebody with a new perspective, great things can happen. So I'm actually kind of excited that we have some, I would say, kind of like viable candidates on the presidential level that are Asian Pacific Americans.
All right,
Like,
now
we have-
you have been wanting to talk about this, so we'll go national. I could talk national. I'm really getting into the presidential race. We've been talking more and more about it on the show. So who's the candidate? As I recall, you're leaning toward Elizabeth Warren. That's who I
Yeah.
think you're leaning toward.
Leaning.
But there's somebody else in the race that I don't believe has ever been mentioned on this show except for in passing. So give him your thoughts.
So besides Bernie, which is a given for me, there's a young man running. And I hate to even say he's young because I can't tell. I'm sorry, I hate to say that,
He's
but
in his
Asians kind of
40s.
look youthful. Well, he's older than I thought.
And Shaw said that. I did not say
No,
that.
I can say it. You can't.
I can't say that.
But anyway, so his name is Andrew Yang, and he started his race actually about a year ago. I actually met him a year ago, and the thing that really impressed me about him is that he started talking about this universal basic income, and the way he looked at it, and I'm not going to articulate it correctly, but the idea is that with technology improving people's lives and kind of, and maybe it's good that Bob isn't here, but changing what earning, how you earn a living, labor, jobs, trying, maybe kind of reducing what kind of work people do. He recognizes that we have to kind of redefine what making a living is in this country. What are we striving for in not just in this country, but in the world? Like, what does it mean to have a quality of life, right? And so theoretically, technology should be making things easier for people. But what I have actually seen is that the wealth is pooling up towards the top 1% while we're all struggling, and there's no reason for us to struggle. So he's kind of started talking about universal basic income, which is really exciting to me because I have to admit I hadn't even thought about that way of thinking because it's very futuristic, but the future is actually now. We're kind of suffering now because we're not redistributing the wealth that's coming from technology in a way that makes sense because we haven't really thought it out, and he has. And the other thing that he's talking about is more of a humanistic approach. So he's really not talking about like, are you Democrat or Republican or conservative? I mean, he is running as a Democrat because nobody can run as a Republican right now the way it is. But, I mean, I kind of like the idea. He's also kind of moving away that I believe both Bernie and Elizabeth are doing, Warren is doing, from like, oh, let's just go after Trump. It's more like, well, what are our ideas for improving people's lives? So he's kind of taken this humanistic approach, which is very appealing to me. And he's got growing following.
No, I've read some of his literature. I'd like to get him if I could get him on the show or get somebody.
Yeah, he does come to Chicago. If he does, I'll text you, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know because, listen, I'm all for people who push the conversation left and get people to explore new ideas. And I think the Democrats, I know I said this to you when we started the show, have been far too content over the last 30 years to allow the Republicans to set the agenda and allow them to be pushed to the right. So I'm hoping
that's how we lost the state legislatures across the country. It's so critical. So for me personally, Ben, is like I have always been a local politics person because I understand that that's where it comes from, but I've been forced into dealing with national politics because of our current president, and it's even hard for me to say his name. I know I'm bad, but whatever. So
what's his name? I forgot his name. The orange
bad
man.
Rom.
Yeah, bad Rom.
Bad
Even
Rom.
better than Rom.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's what it kind of propelled me to do more on the national level. By losing all these state legislatures across the country, this is why we're suffering now because you know?
Well, no, we're very much a locally oriented show. We talk about national politics, but we always do it with people who are from the Chicago area, try to link these national issues to local issues as well. And you're absolutely correct. The Democrats dropped the ball for years and years. And
we did it here.
Yes.
We did it here in Illinois because I don't know what happened, and I'm always thinking ahead, like worried about what communities are going to be affected critically by the loss of a certain like governor and this and that. And I know like people criticize Governor Quinn, but he had done so many good things, and I supported him all the way to the end because I was really worried about people who were on Medicaid and communities of color, and we have a lot of deficit because of Rauner's.
Well,
years.
let me just say this about Governor Quinn, and when he comes on the show many times, and I've said it to him, he always gets a little irritated at me when I say it. But when Governor Quinn was the governor, we were going through this phase. First of all, we were coming out of a very severe recession.
Yes.
So his hands were tied in a ways that Rauner and Rahm, the bad Rahm, and Pritzker now are not tied. And Trump, really tied. And secondly, the Democratic Party had really consumed what I call the Rahm Kool-Aid, this notion that if we move right,
Yep.
we could find solutions and get Republicans. That has never worked.
No, never.
So that was the deck, the cards that were dealt to Patrick Quinn. I believe
Yes.
that, and to a certain degree, he tried to accommodate those forces.
I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah. And anyway, we have run out of time. Ann Shaw, it's a blast having you on. We're going to bring you back. She ran for alderman in the first ward, and she ran against Elia Ramirez. But now she's an advocate for all sorts of important causes, including the Asian American Coalition and the ACLU. Next time you come on, we're going to talk more about ACLU issues, First Amendment stuff, okay?
Of course.
All right, that's Ann Shaw. I'm Ben Joravsky. Let's see. Bob Ryder was here. Edwin Eisendrath was here. Good God, that door was opening. I know. Jake Lewis stopped in briefly. And so it's been a great show, a lot of great people. Of course, Leah did a magnificent job, as she always does. And the man, the myth, the legend, behind the boards. Oh, yes.
And she's Asian American, too.
I know that. I know that girl's Asian American. I know all about her.
Yeah, give her a
we
shout
work
out.
every day the same place, yes, indeed. And this man is not Asian American, but he is the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. And you know what they call him down there? They call him White Lightning.
Nobody calls me that.
Really?
No one calls me that.
Really, no. Nobody calls me that.
That's a long story. I got it from a Gary Owen routine. Anyway, you did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Hey, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows at both Chicago Reader and Chicago Sun-Times website, chicago.suntimes.com/Joravsky, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download your favorite podcast. And hey, if you download the show, remember, we live stream the program Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicago.suntimes.com/Joravsky, chicagoreader.com. We'll see you tomorrow.